wind did not think like a person does. This should not surprise anyone who has familiarity with a spren, though such things are less common now than they once were.
Who is this?
Who
is
is writing Knights of Wind and Truth?
Oh, man. Each one of those different excerpts, Brandon is doing this on purpose, 100%. Each one of those different excerpts makes you think something different. There's different things that might work well with a different blurb, but as soon as you put them all together, just all that goes out the window because they're all slightly different.
Welcome back to Following Note on Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 229, and we are in chapters 5 through 7 of Wind and Truth. The book still isn't out yet as we're recording this. Eliot, how are you?
I am a little bit sad that I don't have a physical copy of the book in my hands. It has made me remember how awesome it is to have a physical, turn the pages, hear that sound of like the pages flipping from one to the next, that crinkle of the pages, that raspy kind of noise. I'm missing all of that as I read on my phone at night. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate, being able to do this as we wait for the book to be in our hands, which will be a mere 2 or 3 days from now. But
I do have a spot waiting for it on my bookshelf right there.
Oh, look at you.
Paul, how are you?
I'm doing swell. Eliot, this is an interesting shift because I am reading the physical text or the virtual text, don't know which one, off my phone, rather than audiobook for this, which has been a... Do
you not know about the SoundCloud?
I did actually do that for chapter 7, just because it was convenient. But the others, it was, we just real time here. We're just past the holidays. I did some holiday travel to visit family. Had time to actually just read. So I was like, why not? Why not sit down and read it? I feel like I might ingest more information, might pick up on more things. I was curious. And really the reason I could go ahead on that is because Dalinar is now reading. And so
yes.
Kaladin feels a bit ashamed, but I'm just following Dalinar's lead here. This whole time I've been a good Alethi Vorin man and, having it read to me. But now I'm learning alongside Dalinar.
You're following the professed heretic of Dalinar and saying the Almighty is dead?
Sure, yes, that one.
Well, your boy Zeth also reads, so you could say you're following in his shoes.
True.
Yeah, Dalinar made it more acceptable, though.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just
a fearless leader.
Curiosity question: are you going to? What's going to be your main method of consumption, kind of going forward? Are you going to go back to audiobook? Or are you going to read the physical?
My plan is to go back to audiobook. That's my plan. However, on a lot of these, given the gravity of this book, the weight that we've had getting ready for this book, and depending on our reading level, how many chapters we cover per week, I might actually end up reading this book somewhat, or at least more so than other books. I think my plan was to steal audiobook. However, I'll kind of see.
If we have any spell checks that Trevor throws our way, those are about to get a lot easier for you.
That's true. Yeah.
Because they're going to spell check me. I'm going to be audiobooking.
There we go.
Paul, do we have a patron?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I was going to say, I think I will be audiobooking, but much more important than that conversation, we have a new, I believe, a surgeon.
Surgeon.
Okay, good. I was like, it's been a long time since I've gotten one of those wrong. But we have a new surgeon this week, and I'm very grateful. I'm going to be confident and say that I know how to say the name. That our surgeon this week is Mike. I'm going to go with Mike. It's spelt M-Y-K, and we're very grateful for our surgeon, Mike. It might be Mick or something. I'm sorry if I'm wrong either way. But Mike, I'm going to go with that. Thank you so much for your support. Last week I had an A on my cup for my lovely wife. And this week I have, it's very hard to see. It's very faintly on my cup. But the letter P, it's my initial this time. So there we have it. Mike, thanks for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Paul, do you have 2 words for a snippet or a brief summary of this week's episode?
I do. My 2 words go a bit hand in hand. My 2 words this week are fortunate lovers. Fortunate, and this is the only time you'll ever catch me using lovers as a word, by the way. Fortunate is, we actually get a notable conversation about fortune, capital F, fortune. If that's how I say that word, and now I feel like I'm saying it wrong. Fortune. It just sounds wrong everywhere now. But we get a conversation about that word with Shallan and Kalek and her 2 spren bonds, making her have an interesting connection to fortune.
Lightweaver level 2.
Yes, exactly. We're reaching new levels of radiant powers here. And also in this episode, we get what I think is probably my favorite, if only, scene that I really like. That is maybe a romantic scene where we get Shallan adoring her beloved Adolin. And I thought it was really sweet, and I did not cringe. I enjoyed it. So there we have it. I think there were moments between Shallan and Adolin before that I've liked, so it's definitely not the only, but I think this might be my favorite. It seemed really, really good and really wholesome. So yeah, fortunate lovers, Shallan and Adolin.
I thought you were going to go for Shallan and Vatha, who Vatha has a crush on the emo Lightweaver girl who Lightweaves like goth tattoos all over her body. Do you remember that?
I do, and that's way more romantic and cool,
Right?
To be honest.
So I thought that's where you're going with that.
But I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it mainline. Gonna keep it with our main characters here. I also want to talk about how it's. I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate, but Shallan and Adolin's quest is essentially to go to the spiritual realm.
True.
So, good luck. Good luck. Maybe those should have been my 2 words.
Eliot, yours?
I almost picked fortune, and I did not. So I'm glad you did, Paul. So you covered some of that I really did want to talk about. The 2 words I did go for, though, they look like they go together on the page, but then when I try and say them, they less so. The 2 words are healing airs. Healing airs. Write them down, and they look like they go together. I went for healing because of
airs as in an H.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Understood.
Yes. Healing, well, and airs actually for Kaladin. He's leaning more and more into this whole therapist direction, career choice. It keeps coming up in all the chapters we're seeing him of. He keeps thinking back to this. I want to be a surgeon of the mind. And what does it look like to help the broken around me when they can no longer receive, an actual surgeon's help? And that's a really interesting direction for this story to be taken. I'm kind of excited about it. There's also this rather shocking scene where Dalaman asks Kaladin to be his heir of Urithiru and the Knights Radiant and kind of everything. And that's kind of wild. So excited to talk about that with you guys. And then I can't quite directly tie air into it, but the whole fortune stuff that you were talking about, Paul, also really intrigued me as well. I had a chat in our Discord in my live reaction to that chapter where that spun some thoughts that actually tied over to Mistborn, interestingly. So yeah, a good set of chapters this week.
I agree. Before we get into the meat of the chapters, I actually want to go back and cover the epigraphs up until this point because we didn't cover them last week. We talked about Knights of Wind and Truth in the first week, but I want to read them all back to back and see what you guys think up until this point. All of these are excerpts from Wind and Truth from the first 5 pages of Knights of Wind and Truth. I'm going to go ahead and read them all. I should have known I was being watched. All my life, the signs were there. I first knew the wind as a child, during days before I knew dreams. What need has a child of dreams or aspirations? They live and love the life that is. The wind told me, before she vanished, that it was the change in Odium's vessel that restored her voice. I wonder, perhaps it is the new storm making people begin to reconsider that the wind is not their enemy. I have read that in the ancient days, the wind often spoke to both human and singer. It would then mean that the wind stopped talking not because of Odium, but because of her people who began to fear her or to worship the storm instead. As a historian, I find such nuances relevant. As a philosopher, I find them enticing. Regardless, the events surrounding the cleansing of Shinovar are of specific relevance, and I am doing my best to record what I can discover of the wind's own words regarding them. Though, now that the wind and the heralds have vanished, I have only 2 sources who can speak of these events. They are my witnesses. However, the wind did not think like a person does. This should not surprise anyone who has familiarity with a spren, though such things are less common now than they once were.
Who is this?
Who
is
is
this?
writing Knights of Wind and Truth?
Oh man. Each one of those different excerpts, Brandon is doing this on purpose, 100%. Each one of those different excerpts makes you think something different. There's different things that might work well with a different blurb, but as soon as you put them all together, just all that goes out the window because they're all slightly different. Who's a historian and also a philosopher? Who's going to be alive at the end of all this to say, yes, well, the heralds and the wind are all gone now, but I'm piecing together what I can. Who the heck is that? It's someone who's talking like they're at the kind of high level of thing. I had a casual chat with the wind the other day, kind of things. Who is this?
2 main theories, but go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say I have been racking my head over this. I feel like you could make an argument for most characters because there's so much kind of unknown. Like so much is kind of like ambiguous right now that I could see this being Shallan. We've seen whispers and like that kind of things that she had as a child. Because there's so much with the wind and Kaladin's story, I feel like you could make a case for that, but I don't feel like maybe I could see that with some time passing. Kaladin, we're getting Zeth's flashbacks this book. We haven't had one yet, but we are getting them. It's possible that we see him as a child hearing these things. There's honestly so many names you could throw out, and I feel like I could come up with a reason why they might be the author to Knights of Wind and Truth.
So there's one key one here that I want to key into. Regardless, the events surrounding the cleansing of Shinovar are of specific relevance, and I am doing my best to record what I can discover of the wind's own words regarding them. Though, now that the wind and heralds have vanished, I have only 2 sources who can speak of those events. They are my witnesses. Couple things there. Events surrounding the cleansing of Shinovar makes me think they were not there for the events regarding the cleansing of Shinovar, which would disqualify Zeth and Kaladin in my head. But up until that one, I was betting on Kaladin because, I was watched as a child. The wind started speaking to me. Well, that's Kaladin, right? Like we've known that the wind was hanging out with Kaladin long before even Syl showed up. So I thought that was Kaladin until that sentence. And then it says...
Oh, wait, go ahead and read. But before you... I don't know if you're planning to name any other names. I had a thought pop into my head, so I want to follow up.
Okay. Then it says, now that the wind and heralds have vanished, I have only 2 sources who can speak to these events. Okay. Is that Kaladin and Zeth? Or is that Kaladin and Syl? Or is that Dalinar? Because Dalinar now knows that the wind is speaking to Kaladin. Is Dalinar a witness? Who are the remaining 2 witnesses? Two big theories. One, I think the most possible, most feasible is Yasna. I think Yasna, after this whole book is done, is writing a history and starting with this. Second, I think this might actually be a book quite later in our timeline, published by someone young, Oradin, writing a history of his brother, something along those lines, or Renarin, somebody who has been pretty, or Gavinor, somebody who's pretty well in the background right now, but could easily become a main character later. The Oradin and Yasna are my 2 main candidates.
I was going to bring up Renarin. I was going to bring him up into this conversation because I'm trying to think of someone who, I don't know, not to sound creepy, but maybe hearing voices from their childhood. That's that sounds a bit creepy. But so Renarin has this corrupted spren, has always, like, even before that, has had this, what did they refer to it? His, like, sickness or whatever they call it, where he freezes up. That could just be, Brandon Sanderson is really good at writing about various, like, situations and disabilities and things. So that may be that. And so I don't want to read into that. I don't remember exactly how that was written. But anyways, I'm saying that Renarin has been a notable childish figure and had a lot of interesting things happen to him. We also know that he is supposed to be a key component regarding defeating Odium. So I think there's a pretty strong case for that. If not, I agree, and I like your theory about either a Gavinor or an Oradin. I want to ask about Gavinor. So Gavinor was with who was it? Aesidon was his mother.
Yes.
And Aesidon was essentially overtaken or possessed by which unmade? Do y'all remember?
No, not Nergal.
I don't remember.
Yelignar.
Yelignar.
Okay. He who consumes from within.
Yeah. And at that time in Kholinar, there were 3 unmade, right? There was Yelignar. Yes. There were a bunch. I don't remember.
Yelignar, a Shirtmarn, the Heart of the Revel, and Ja'Nat was there as well.
Okay. A bunch of unmade. Isn't one of the theories here that Ba Edo Mishram might be correlated to the wind, or did I just put that in my head? There's been lots of mentions of Ba Edo Mishram and lots of mentions of the wind, so that might not actually correlate. But in my head, that puts Gavinor. I think I'm wrong. This is quite a stretch. But if hypothetically Ba Edo Mishram is related to the wind, then in my head, the connection that Gavinor has as a young age to these other unmade being in the same area could connect. However, that's taking a lot of liberties, making a lot of assumptions. So I don't know. I could see it being any of them.
I think your Ba Edo Mishram and the wind correlation is not crazy at all. That's actually something I've come away with these chapters feeling as well. I don't know if there's ever a character that like says that necessarily, but I don't know. I was getting those vibes for sure.
It says that my memory of this is the wind is said to be in Shinovar, or says listen to the bondsmith who's saying go to Shinovar.
Yes.
Come to me in Shinovar. Yeah.
Yes, come to me in Shinovar. And hasn't there also been mentioned that Ba Edo Mishram was in Shinovar or was over Shinovar or something like that?
There's mention that there are unmade in Shinovar,
Okay.
not specifically by Ido Mishram, though.
Okay.
Real quick on the author of Knights of Wind and Truth, I want to say Yasna has me intrigued as a candidate, because what popped into my head was remembering that there's still some kind of there's some secrets about Yasna that we have not been told yet. There was a couple of lines really vague about, oh yeah, there was that thing in her childhood, but we don't speak of that.
Yeah.
And then when they move on, that happened like 2 or 3 times.
When they locked me up with a straitjacket, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Whereas like, oh yeah, but that hasn't happened since I was a child. Moving on. And so basically the one that really throws me, I think, is the epigraph from chapter 2, actually, which is the one that said, I first knew the wind as a child during days before I knew dreams. Who knew the wind as a child that wasn't Kaladin? Because I'm with you, Trevor, in the logic later that I kind of feel like we're going to disqualify Kaladin later as we go. So who else? Yasna, maybe? I don't know.
By the
Maybe.
logic that Trevor put forward about the witnesses to the scouring of Shinovar, etc., that kind of disqualifies Zeth. But I mean, given that we are going to see his backstory and that he is from Shinovar, where allegedly the wind is, I feel like it's not far fetched to say it could be Zeth, but we're gonna need a lot of character development.
Yeah.
A lot of changes for that to be the case.
The dreams line almost makes me want to shoot straight down the aisle and say Dalinar. But Dalinar is surprised in chapter 6 when Kaladin says the wind's been speaking to me. So for the wind to have Dalinar has nothing to do with the wind. But I guess neither does Yasna, so I don't know.
He could be on the truth side, I guess. His whole point has been about being honor, full of honor, I would say, and virtuous, all the things that make up the way of kings, and that he views it as the truth and the true way to lead and to live out your life. I feel like we could get mention of that. It is labeled Knights of Wind and Truth, but you're right. I don't know when, unless he's wrongfully calling the Stormfather the wind here.
Right.
It could be, or referring to the wind as like the ice storms or something. There's a lot. I want to throw another name out there for everyone to react to. Is there any chance that we get flashbacks for Teravangian, and that Teravangian writes Knights of Wind and Truth?
So I think it was Tim that brought this up on the early release chapters. Tim brought up Teravangian, and I shut it down. I was like, if Teravangian is the author of Knights of Wind and Truth, I quit. That is not who I want to be reading.
Well, it's either him or Moash, so pick your poison, I guess. So,
I mean, it's also entirely possible here that this is someone we don't even know about yet. I mean,
Which is what David said.
That was true of Words of Radiance, right? It's random scholar Y is the author of Words of Radiance.
Right.
Although, I think it's an obvious name that you guys aren't thinking of. It's ready for it? No. It's Noadon. Noadon is not actually dead. Noadon is a cognitive shadow putzing around somewhere. He's a historian. He's a philosopher. He totally could be having chats with the wind.
Hey,
it's Noadon.
I don't know if you're joking or not, but last episode, Pattern was like, yo, the spiritual realm's crazy. The future and the past and the present are all kind of together, it could feasibly be Noadon.
Oh yeah.
I think so. True. I think so too. Honestly, I think there's a chance. I think it could be interesting because we are following Dalinar so closely. I mean, not in page count or word count right now, but we know he's going to be pivotal to. He's going to get his screen time. Dalinar is going to get his screen time, and if there's anyone who would be in contact, whether it's real or not, with Noadon, it would be Dalinar. So it's not impossible. It's probably more likely than the Teravangian in theory.
I would agree with you. All right. The capital F fortune name drop. Kalak says to Shallan, "Wow, this art piece is really cool. Do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Tap into fortune when you draw people. Do all Lightweavers of your day do this?" Thoughts?
So does this explain why we've had several scenes? I asked, does this explain? This does explain, in my mind, why Shallan has been drawing in this way. Think back to Words of Radiance, where she draws the crew members, she draws Gaz and these others as a more heroic, honorable version of themselves, and they are inspired by it, and it's a good moment.
She does
So
she does the same for Elokar too in Oathbringer. She draws Elokar as like a wise king, and he holds it to his chest as he dies. I just reread Oathbringer recently. Great scene.
yeah, exactly that. She has been tapping into fortune, capital F fortune, which I still feel like it sounds weird to me. She's been tapping into that to see what does Collect say? It's like to get a glimpse of a different version of somebody.
Do you remember that in Mistborn?
Gold? Was it gold?
Eliot, did you do research on this?
I did do a little bit of research on this because this really intrigued me. I had not thought about Shallan's past art in this way before. But then as soon as Kalek said it, a few things dropped into place. One, fortune. And then two, I immediately thought over to Mistborn. You're right, Paul. Gold is one of them. I actually had a chat in our Discord about this because there's a few different ways you can look at this. There's a few different allomantic powers that are kind of similar to this. We see some rather large spoilers for Mistborn coming here. We see the 11th metal used to view an alternate version of someone else. Gold, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, allows you to view an alternate version of yourself, which
Yes.
Vin like tries at one point and she's like, well, that's useless. I don't care about alternate versions of myself, and then kind of moves on from.
Well, it actually
Gold.
kind of freaks her out.
Yeah.
It shows her as like an urchin who's about to die, and she's like, "No, thank you," and runs away from that.
Right. But 11th metal, which is really important to the events of that story, right? They're able to solve the puzzle because they can see, oh, you're not who you said you were, because I can see an alternate version of you. I had not thought about that being what Shallan is doing, or kind of maybe related to that with these drawings. She goes and draws a pirate as a hero, and then he becomes a hero.
Yeah. In Mistborn Era 2, we get a breakdown of what all the metals tap into, right? And maybe at the end of the book in like the Ars Arcanum section.
Yep.
Are we able to look and see which one? Because one of them specifically said it taps into fortune. Is that 11th metal one? Because it feels like
Yes.
that would be the case. Yeah. That this one, that what we did not know at the time of reading Mistborn is that this is tapping into fortune. And I have to say, going back that far to like Mistborn Era 1 is really impressive. For that to be tied to fortune that we are seeing here, I think that's sick. I think that's awesome.
So to answer your question, Metal's quick reference chart from the Ars Arcanum of the Bands of Mourning. Chromium stores fortune. So that's a ferrochemical power. There's got to be one that burns fortune. Give me 1 second. I'll find it.
Yeah, it's Mistborn, so it's crazy confusing because you have all these metals, but then you also have allomancy, ferrochemy, and hemalurgy, which are all going to do slightly different things with the metal that you're talking about.
Yeah, chromium stores fortune. It's in here somewhere. I'll find it, but yeah, anyway.
But that's sentiment. Yeah.
All of that to say, this almost gets kind of glossed over fairly quickly in the scene that we're reading here with Shallan and Kalek. He goes, "Oh, you're using fortune." And Shallan goes, "Oh, I'm using fortune." And then they kind of move on. But I really paused there because I thought up till now, fortune was extremely rare. Like extremely, extremely rare. Like Odium has the power that he does because he has access to fortune. And like
Hoyt has the power he has because of fortune.
Exactly. And like the only other people in the whole story that we know have access to fortune is Hoyd and like Renarin.
Yep.
And maybe like Taravangian on the day he wrote the diagram. Like those kinds of things. So now you're telling me that Shallan just does this whenever she whips out her sketchbook? This is kind of crazy.
Capital M memory.
Ooh. That's early too. That's like beginning of Way of Kings stuff.
It's actually mentioned in here. So I've had a theory for a while that the Unmade mess with Shallan's powers. And as she grows up, she like sketches some like crazy stuff of her brothers like burning in a furnace. And her brothers are like, "Yo, that's really creepy, Shallan. What are you doing?" She's like, "I don't know." And then she leaves and goes to Kharbranth, and her sketches return to her. She's like, "Yeah, I haven't done this in a long time. I need to be sketching more." And then she shows up at the tower and her sketching leaves her because there's an unmade present. She can't sketch the tower. She can't sketch other people. And she's like, "Why can't I do this? I'm like freaking out about my second ideal that I just swore." But no, there's an unmade present. And then in Kholinar, she has a really hard time sketching people. She sketches like urchins on the street and has issues with it because there's like 3 unmade present. So where's it going with this? Unmade mess with Shallan's capital M memory fortune stuff.
I think there's something else that could be messing with Shallan as well, because Kellic pretty much says it in chapter 7. He basically says, like, you have 2 bonds. We used to have rules against that because it messes some things up, is kind of what he says.
Yeah.
He almost seems to directly say, like, hey, there's going to be unhealthy consequences because you have 2 bonds. I wonder if that's playing into this as well.
Yeah. Or maybe the creepy Ba'eda Mishram faces in the sketches are like one of those consequences of like people are going to manipulate you. You've opened yourself to like spiritual realm manipulation because of this.
Right. It's almost like, you know, she's got these different bonds going on. It's like wires are going to get crossed. She's going to get like connected to things she's not supposed to be. She's going to get like, yeah, you said it, influences from other areas, all because she's messing with the Nahel bond. He uses this fancy word. Kellic is like whipping out these weird words that you have to like pull out the dictionary for. And one of the words is...
Shallan asks him about it. She's like, "I've never heard that word before." And Flack's like, "Oh, my bad. Sorry."
It's like,
I know what you're talking
imbricated or something like that. Her bonds are imbricated.
Oh, yes. After all of what we went through in Rhythm of War, only 12 honor spren show up. And Nodum says, isn't this all kind of irrelevant because the battle's in 9 days? And like, if they're just gonna go bond and start a bond, you can't do much in 9 days. And Shallan's like, "Oh, yeah. Well, I guess they'll be useful in peacetime," is what they say.
That's such a lame answer.
I mean, what are you gonna say? He's right that we've done all this work to get the honor spren to join us, and the story's over.
This is a gut punch for the characters and for me as well. Like, Rhythm of War was one of my favorites of the Stormlight archive, I think, turning out to be, and parts of, Adolin standing up to the court, this sham of a court, and the spren coming to back him up, and Maya speaking. Like, all these moments are so powerful and so moving, and so, oh my gosh, so much is going to build off of this. And then 12 honor spren join them. Like, oof, that's rough. And then Shallan's answer to that, to the challenge there of, oh, does this really matter, is so lame, because I think our characters are putting way too much emphasis on this contest of champions. They seem to think everything's going to be irrelevant after the contest of champions. I think there are many, many, many other possibilities of the way this turns out, that you still need an army of magic users at the end of the day.
I agree.
One thing I think is interesting. So I talked about this last episode about Hoyd is kind of let loose and he's just giving answers out now. And same with Kalak. They're just, yeah, you use fortune because you have 2 bonds. And yeah, it's in the spiritual realm. We put him there. Yeah, like it's very direct answers to things. Do y'all think it's also a bit direct how much Maya is speaking now? Maya is like, that
She's
was
back.
huge. Yeah, that was the huge deal in Rhythm of War. Is Maya spoke. We chose, all she could say, and it was monumental. It was like heard around the Shadesmar, and but now she's just like talking, less so maybe than like Syl, right? Obviously, but quite a bit. It seems like that just opened the box, and now she can talk. Mentions it's maybe difficult, but I was a bit surprised. I thought we might get a little bit of the Taln treatment where Maya's there, but we don't really get any information for a while.
I have less issues with spren recovering super fast than humans. Like, spren are whatever you perceive them to be, or at least what you perceive them to be has a big influence on what they are. So Maya spent 2 full books walking around saying nothing. And as Adolin began to acknowledge her as a person, then she finally says her words. Now she can talk. That's fine with me. I'm actually really enjoying that Maya could be an actual character in this book.
I'm certainly enjoying it as well, for the record, but it did seem like a quick jump. But you make a great point. With a spren, different rules.
I think I was expecting some kind of an oath to happen at some point, and that was going to be like the key that unlocked Maya, whereas it seems to have not necessarily been that, unless somewhere in all those scenes with Aelin there was some kind of an oath that happened, or maybe Maya like spoke herself into existence in a way.
Yeah.
She was able to break through, kind of building on the strength that Adolin has given her for all the reasons you just said, Trevor, but then maybe her kind of bursting forth and speaking for herself was that moment that she kind of comes back to awareness and being able to speak. I think she could be a cool character. I agree.
You're just trying to get one of your bingo slots checked off for Adolin swearing an oath or something like that.
So
is that Paul? Somebody has Adolin becomes a Knight Radiant. That's
Yes,
Paul.
I think that's mine.
That's Paul.
I have Adolin becomes a bondsmith. So that's a whole different direction.
So you don't want a bond between Adolin and Maya.
Well, we do know it's possible to have multiple now. So
True.
Maya is also a cultivation spren. So that's a step in a direction that maybe leads down that path. But yeah, I have that in my very far-fetched row of my bingo board. I'll just say that.
All right. King Kaladin. It's coming. What did you guys think of Let's Go Chat on a has snowed mountaintop, not currently snowing mountaintop. It has snowed on said mountaintop. And we're going to go chat about heirs.
This is pretty epic, in my opinion. I think it's really cool to think of Kaladin's development. We saw so much as the soldier and now as like the surgeon or therapist side. Thinking about the possibility to transfer that to a kingship in the future has me super, super excited.
There's two major parts to this conversation. One is Surgeon of the Mind, Kaladin. Go help Ishar, go help Zeth. Second is, oh, by the way, I drew up this will that if Dalinar and Navani disappear, you're next in line. And Kaladin like freaks out, like full on, like no way. And all Dalinar says is, I get it, I understand. All I ask is you think about it. And that's how we end the chapter. So, yeah.
I'm not quite sure what I think about Kaladin as a king. Kaladin is a leader. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. He is an amazing leader. He does a lot of things really well in leadership roles. King of an entire, well, what is this a kingship of? Dalinar is very specific.
City-state.
It's not Alethkar. He talks specifically about how there's going to be a separate chain of lineage. What's the right word there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Passing of the crown for Alethkar, which will be from Yasna down through Gavinor.
Right.
Dalinar is king of Urithiru and head of the Knights Radiant. So that's what he wants to name Kaladin as heir to. So head of Knights Radiant, king of Urithiru. How do I think Kaladin would do with that? I don't know. I don't know. My first gut reaction is I like it, because I think a lot of leaders who don't want to be leaders actually make the best leaders. That those who don't want the power are far more resistant to the corruption of said power, and often are much more servanthood in their approach to leadership and do a fantastic job. Kaladin would definitely be in that category. Is Kaladin actually going to be the right fit for like a political role? Maybe. Solid maybe.
Allow me to read you a death rattle. He must pick it up. The fallen title, the tower, the crown, and the spear.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby.
That feels like a notable answer right there. It feels like we're going to see it.
What are the glyphs of Kholinar House again?
The tower and the crown.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's specifically brought up in this chapter twice. Dalinar's wearing his glyphs on his back, and Dalinar asks him, yo, what have you done with that cape that I gave you 3 books ago? I keep it in my chest as a kind of a token of, honor. But I don't wear it because it's got your glyphs on it, Dalinar, the crown, and the tower.
So this chapter goes on and Kaladin's like, well, I guess I should think about it instead of declining.
Correct.
This feels like the most stereotypical moment where it's like, yeah, I'll think about it. And, like, I don't know, Bilbo Baggins setting off on an adventure. He's going to decline, but then go back, or something of that nature where he's going to be like, no, I don't think I'm prepared for this. I don't think I can do this. But is it unsafe for me to say, yes, Kaladin is going to become king of Urithiru? I feel that it is very safe, especially given that death rattle that you mentioned.
Well,
it ties together too nicely.
Here's the problem with the death rattle. Let me read it again. He must pick it up, the fallen title, the tower, the crown, and the spear. I read that as all three have fallen, and he must pick it up. So I wonder if this is actually a back half and somebody inherits from Kaladin. Because up until this point, up until this chapter, like obviously the tower, the crown, the spear, everybody saw, okay, that's Dalinar and Kaladin. I get that. But up until this point, those were two separate things. Now it may not be.
So this comes into the conversation because Adolin and Renarin have said they don't want to do this.
Correct.
Right. What are the chances that this is Renarin? Because there's a little bit of extra meaning with him picking up a spear. Kaladin as the spear, Renarin who has been unable or not well to fight.
Okay.
Him having previously declined this, now seeing the necessity, steps up.
Yeah, feasible.
I could also see it in the sense of Kaladin of it feels like he's set down the spear. It feels like he's gone to be the surgeon, perhaps specifically the surgeon of the mind. So is this also a moment where he's faced with the choice to take on this kingship and step back into the role of a warrior?
And the wind specifically said that, didn't it? I'm going to need you to fight again. I'm sorry.
Oh,
like
maybe
the first chapter. It was the first chapter, I think.
Yeah. So I feel like that death rattle fits very well with our scenario here with Kaladin in this present time. But I also don't know that the death rattle implies that the answer is yes. The answer can still be no. But it could be pointing at that is the decision that Kaladin will have to make, is maybe Dalinar falls and Kaladin will be left with the choice. What happens then?
I also want to add to that of Dalinar gives him this paper and it's been notarized essentially and is like, yeah, if you decide to do so, just take this paper to the people. I don't remember who he refers to.
The head Ardents or whoever it was.
Yeah, exactly. And like, this is your deed or your ticket to the kingship there. And so, yeah, it could be an after the fact decision.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if, well, it's Dalinar and Navani. I feel like Navani's fairly safe until this chapter, and now I don't. Like it's specifically including both Dalinar and Navani have to be gone, and then Kaladin would inherit. Well, okay, I thought Navani had her arc and we were done, but maybe not.
Do you think if Dalinar loses the Contest of Champions, that Navani will ask to go too?
She could, yeah. I can see that.
I can see that happening as well.
I don't know why I didn't consider King Kaladin as an outcome of this book, but I really didn't have this on my radar until now.
Kaladin is the frontline leader. Kaladin is the charge into battle with the troops leader, not really the strategy and troop counts and supply chains. Like those are the kinds of things a king has to think about, is the economics, the politics of it all.
Yeah, he's not very big on like philosophy. Like,
no,
do you execute the three murderers and the one innocent guy if you can't figure it out? That's a Dalinar Taravangian discussion. Kaladin, right. I don't think would care. I mean, he would care, but he wouldn't sit there and think about it all day.
Yeah, I don't. That's why I was so torn on the would Kaladin make a good king? For some reasons, yes. For some reasons, no.
I hear and agree with what you're saying, Eliot, but I'm guessing that we're going to see a lot of that development and those questions and those thoughts come up in this book. Kaladin has been set out to be the counselor, if you will, for Zeth,
Yeah.
and to try and counsel Ishar, which are rather large tasks, each of them are, and are likely going to take a lot of thought and a lot of contemplating, then I think we could have that shift in Kaladin's perspective. You're right about the whole economical thing. He's not like Shallan, I feel like, would be far more well versed in that knowledge and those decisions. She's well read, well studied, I guess, right?
Maybe Radiant.
Yeah, exactly. Kaladin, not so much, but I would also wonder if he would be king of Urithiru and of the Knights Radiant. They might have a different role in Roshar than, say, the king of Alethkar. It might be a bit different. Something he's more suited to.
There's a line in the middle of this conversation which caught my eye, and I actually I need your guys' help with it. It's right after the reaction that Kaladin gives to being told he needs to be the heir. And then Dalinar responds with, well, okay, so Kaladin says, no, I can't do this. I'm broken. Dalinar replies with this: life breaks us, then we fill the cracks with something stronger. Isn't that, am I remembering this wrong? Isn't that Teft?
That's a Kaladin quote to Teft.
Okay.
So Teft, at the end of Oathbringer, swears his third ideal: I will protect even those I hate, even if the one I hate most is myself.
Right.
He says that as Urithiru is under attack.
Yeah.
Walks down the stairs as third ideal, defends Urithiru successfully, basically on his own. One of the reasons why Teft is top 5 characters in Cosmere. Paul. But at the end of the book, like the last chapter of the book, Teft and Kaladin are talking on a roof in Thaylen City, Thaylen Field, and Teft's like, "Man, I thought swearing my ideal would cure me of my fire moss. Like, I still feel the urge of fire moss. Why is this not gone?" And that's where that line comes in from Kaladin to Teft.
Okay. So Dalinar is quoting Kaladin back to him.
Correct. He's quoting Kaladin to Kaladin.
Got it. Curious how Dalinar heard that.
Correct.
Bridge 4, like all quoting that now to each other?
Maybe. I mean, I could see it. But yes, I remember, or I listened to this chapter for the first time, and I heard that line, and I was like, what? Are we quoting like the Way of Kings? Or I couldn't place it until I like spoke it out loud, and there's a missing line of life breaks us, Teft, but then we fill the cracks with something stronger. And I was like, oh, that's where that quote's from. So yeah, Dalinar is quoting Kaladin to Kaladin. Where Kaladin got it from, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they both heard it from the wind.
Oh.
Well, okay, actually it leans into the theory of Lirin. Lirin being like somebody really important and speaking a lot of important oaths and stuff to people, or to Kaladin as he's young. There's a whole theory on Lirin being Tatervast. Anything else?
They have a flying horse later on.
They do have Dalinar's old horse, which is now Adolin's and is flying in Shadesmar. That did happen, yes.
Yeah.
And they intentionally leave behind like 6 people because they choose to take the horse and all of Adolin's swords instead.
True.
Felt a little selfish on our Adolin boy side.
That's true. They did give the horse quite a bit of spotlight here. They mentioned that the horse may seem to be invested itself,
Yeah.
that it's wisping maybe Stormlight and things like that off of it, which is fascinating. I know that we've seen that Rashadium are different. It's obviously not like a horse. They are truly on another level. More akin to bonding a shard blade is like sort of like bonding Rashadium. Not quite the same process, but like that prestigious situation. So it's interesting. I feel like this was the little. I feel like Brandon Sanderson is throwing bones out. He threw a bone out last episode for the people who want to see Kaladin and Syl get together. Here he is for the horse lovers. The horse gets the spotlight.
This is his apology for the first chapter where horses featured significantly, and he titled it Monsters. And Kaladin was like freaked out about horses and named them monsters.
That's right. That's right. This is Sanderson's apology.
There's one more reference in chapter 7 that I thought was noteworthy. It's another Kalek is talking to Shallan, and you don't know what's relevant and what's not. But he makes references to Shallan being able to make solid light weavings.
Oh, yeah.
And that felt kind of important. And Shallan goes like, oh, yeah, I remember standing on the battlefield and like holding hands with Vale and Radiant. And kind of equating that. But Kellic seems to be like, oh, well, light and matter are basically the same thing. They're both just energy. And maybe the implication there being that light weavers can make solid illusions, which at first glance, I was like, oh, okay, sure. But then as you start to think about that, it starts to get in some crazy territory. Like, if you could just make anything in front of you whenever you want it, you could do some powerful things with that.
Or if you put the Shallan twist on it, you could just make Radiant, and she could just be walking around.
Yeah.
And like interacting with people.
Or you could make a giant rose pink mech and fight your enemies with it. Or you can just make a key and open the locked door that's in front of you. Like, is that the direction we're going with this stuff?
Kalak actually makes an interesting line of back to the fortune thing. Kalak says, do light weavers in your age do this a lot? Which actually made us think on the preview podcast, okay, do Knights Radiant have like different variations of the same power on different desolations? Because Kalak makes the assumption, or jumps to the assumption, that light weavers can now do this. Well, okay. Could they? That would mean they don't do it before, but could feasibly evolve to that. So we then beg the question of, okay, did the Knights Radiant like evolve as they came back each time? We went down a rabbit hole with that one. But anything else?
I don't think so. I think we're on a good trajectory. We've got some goals for our heroes to go after.
Those goals are pretty big. Going to Shinovar to counsel Ishar and Zeth, and on the other side, going to the spiritual realm. So I think that sounds great. Let's meet back at lunch, and once we're all done. So
if one is successful and one is not, which one is successful? Helping Ishar and going to the spiritual realm.
I think helping Ishar is the one that would be unsuccessful.
I'm a dodge your question and say I think you're asking the wrong question. I don't know that successful is going to be our measure of what happens here. I think it's going to be go to Shinovar. Crazy stuff goes down, and we get revealed a bunch of stuff we never even thought about before, and it changes the rules of the game. And what we think is successful right now is not even going to be the conversation we're having 40 chapters from now.
All right. One more question. Wit says Kaladin won't be back in time. Kaladin may not even see Dalinar again. will Kaladin be back in time? In 10 days?
I don't think so. I don't think he will be back. They mentioned that Zeth can write and has a span read.
Right?
I think they will communicate if there is a chance that Kaladin comes back in this time frame. I think it would be more likely that. Sorry, I spilled water on my keyboard. Splashed some. If you're watching, you probably saw my face jump with panic. Anyways, if Kaladin makes it back, it is like they spend this time traveling to Shinovar. They do this stuff, and it's like one day until, and he's like riding a storm or something back to your Thiru at some kind of lightning speed, some kind of crazy last-second stretch.
I think Wit knows what he's talking about. I think Kaladin does not make it back in time.
I think Wit doesn't know what he's talking about. And Kaladin accidentally just inherited the Contest of Champions.
Oh.
I don't think...
Inherited?
Yes, I think something might happen to Dalinar, and Contest of Champions has to move forward, and now Kaladin is next in line.
Because he's the heir to the,
yes,
throne that Dalinar just gave him?
Yeah, he's got to pick up the crown, the tower, and the spear to go fight in the Contest of Champions.
Honor's dead, but I'll see what I can do.
Correct. I think Dalinar has every intention to be his own champion, but has accidentally inherited Kaladin to do that for him, as he is indisposed somehow. All right, let's reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Eliot and Paul.
Bye now.
See you next week.